Good morning, students of Conversation 1. Today is Saturday, and this is our last makeup lecture, because next week, as I said, we're just going to do the Tuesday lecture as normal, because you don't have to log in on the holiday if you don't want to. You can just watch it anytime during the week. So this is the Saturday morning edition. My children are actually at the grandparents' temporarily, so I am trying to do a daytime lecture. I think the lighting is not actually as good as the evening because some light comes in through the window, but it's just better not to do lectures at 1 o'clock in the morning every time. So today the title of the chapter is Memorable Experiences. I'm just going to shorten that to memories, and it's pretty straightforward. A lot of the exercises and vocabulary in the textbook are actually related to emotions, because my minor was psychology in university. I ended up I was going to double major, and then I cut it back because I realized that I didn't really want to be a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist. So in my senior year, I did almost all English classes, and I finished up my degree. But I was very interested in psychology. And what I learned in my cognition class, which cognition means, how the brain processes information and how you think. My cognition professor impressed upon us that memory was related to attention. So the way that you end up remembering things, the way that your brain operates, is that if something is intense and if you focus on it, then it decides to keep that information in your head. And if it's something that's not significant, and this makes sense for survival purposes, you can't pay attention to everything. So the things you pay attention to the most, those things are going to, be permanent, almost permanently, or in the long term, they're going to stick in your memory. And the things that you don't care about, that information is just going to be sort of wiped out and replaced. So things that go into your long-term memory, things that you can remember from when you were young, there's probably some sort of connection, some sort of, emotional attachment to it that can involve various types of it can be positive or it can be negative, but it's about the intensity of the experience. In the textbook, the example for the story of the childhood memory is this little boy who fell into a river and almost drowned. And I had 1 year, this is not that long ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I had a student, he was a really good student, and he chose to tell me the story about he was swimming in a river. And he was a good swimmer when he was young. I'm going to say it was in Muju, but I could be wrong. But he was in a mountain, he jumped into a mountain river, a stream, to swim. And he had taken swimming lessons, and he was in elementary school, probably about 10 years old. And he was confident in his swimming ability, so he jumped in there, but it was summer, but the water temperature was really cold. So when he jumped in there, basically the shock of the temperature of the water caused his muscles to seize up, and he was unable to swim. So he started to sink, and which is, you can imagine how terrifying that would be. And he sunk under, he was submerged and passed under the water, and his uncle jumped in the water, swam out and dragged him out, and then he had to be revived. His lungs were full of water, so they had to do CPR and AR to revive him. So he actually coughed up water and everything, like he wasn't breathing when they pulled him out. And he never went swimming again. So that's the kind of memory that you would call traumatic. This is what we call trauma, is where something that happens to you is basically imprinted in your mind in such a way that it affects your behavior for the rest of your life. Like, you never forget it. And a traumatic experience is a very negative thing. It can be inhibitory. It can cause you to not be able to do things. In the case of my student, and if he watches this video, I hope he does, but he will know I'm talking about him. But that's what happened to him. Is he has an aversion for water. It's more than an aversion, though. Aversion means you don't. Being averse to something is it pushes you away and you don't want to do it. But this is really more serious. Is that it's more like a terror that he can't go swimming. He can't overcome that thing because it was too much, and he remembers it clearly. And that the prospect of that happening again causes him to, never expose himself to the possibility again. But part of the interesting part of the story was that he said that he was a good swimmer and he loved swimming until that point. Now, that makes for a good story, and he spoke English quite well, so all the other things were in place too, like pronunciation and grammar and organization. He told the story very well, but 20% of your interview score is based on the content, and that's sort of a story like that has some point to it and a reversal or an experience that's meaningful. When it comes to me judging the content to your story, if it's a more interesting story and it has more components to it, then you're going to end up with a higher score in that category. That's sort of how the content score works. So yeah, that's a good example of a really, intense story, which your story doesn't have to be intense, and it doesn't have to be traumatic. That's just an example. It's probably, if it's a memory that's very clear from when you're young, because we are talking about memories, so you have to do this in the past tense. It can be, I usually say to my students, you're freshmen, it's conversation one. So I say, don't tell me about last month when you first came to university, because it's very fresh. At least go back to high school. So if something happened last year when you were in high school, that's fine. Anything in high school, anything in middle school or elementary school or when you were young, your whole life up until university is a possibility as a choice for what memory you're going to talk about. So they have a list of emotions right away on page 90 in chapter 8. They ask the question, how do you feel now and how did you feel yesterday? One of the things that is also important about the content score of your answer is that if you talk about the memory, I would like you to relate that memory to how you are today. I talk about this in other cases too. Is that what's the point of talking about this memory? Well, the point is that it's affected you. So my student who talked about the swimming experience, he's basically saying that swimming is not a part of his life anymore because of that. It could be the opposite though. You could have a memory of something that was very distinct that could cause you to do something. You could have a very positive experience, like, when you were really young, you could have watched you're not quite old enough, but some students watched the World Cup, or you're old enough to have watched Kim Yana. And if some young Koreans probably watched Kim Yana, do her gold medal performance in Vancouver and thought to themselves, I want to be like her and I want to be a figure skater. It's not everybody, but there's enough of them. She herself, was such a big factor in promoting the sport that there are Koreans. And the same thing goes for golf in Korea. There's all these women who are successful golfers, and they're skilled and elegant, and they're good looking, and if you have the money and your parents are interested in you and you decide, I want to be a LPGA golfer, it's probably, you might remember when you were young. I can distinctly remember, I never ended up being a pro anything in terms of athletics, but I can remember distinctly when I was young. The first Super Bowl that I watched was Joe Montana, and you don't have any idea who I'm talking about, but Joe Montana is a legend He won the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals, and I like the Bengals because they have tiger stripes on their helmets. But in that Super Bowl game, Jerry Rice was one of the players. He was a wide receiver that caught the football that Joe Montana threw, and they won the game. And that I was not. I just remember being really young. I guess this is 1989 or something. Not sure. But I was probably in the middle of elementary school, and the performance of Joe Montana and Jerry Rice and the team of the San Francisco 49ers impressed me so much that I just wanted to be Joe Montana. I never really played football very much, just 1 year in high school. But I'm a 49ers fan also. And when somebody asks me what football I cheer for them. That's because the first memory I have of watching American football is that. I can't remember anything else earlier. It's Joe Montana winning the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals. So there can be positive memories. They kind of get anchored with the emotion, kind of impresses it into your memory. And the more, like I said, the more intense it is, there's a possibility also that a very intense memory, if it's negative especially, can be buried. You can be traumatized by something and you can forget it on purpose, or your brain can just protect you from it. But if you're going to talk about something traumatic, like my students' swimming experience, I should caution you. I don't want you to be emotional when you tell the story. You can't go into the interview and talk about something that causes you to have anxiety or to cry or get upset and become nervous because of what you're talking about, because that's going to interfere with the interview. So just be careful. If it's something that you can talk about and you're comfortable with dealing with that, then fine. But otherwise, you should certainly choose something more positive. So I'll give you another example going forward here. They've got angry, exhausted, scared, embarrassed, nervous, surprised, thrilled. So really, only 2 out of the 7 adjectives that they give you on page 90 are actually positive. Angry, negative. Exhausted, negative. Scared, negative. Thrilled, okay, good. That's a lot of, excitement. Embarrassed, no, don't like that. Nervous, that's not helpful. There's 8. Surprised and worried. I missed the other word on the binding. But worried is also negative. So 6 out of 8 are negative. And this is the negative emotions are more plentiful when it comes to their effect on our memory because I think it's part of survival. You want to remember the things. You want to remember the mistakes and the situations that are hard for you so you can avoid them. And that's why you remember them, so that you don't have to experience them again. Your brain's telling you that was not good, so let's not do that again. Don't forget that. Okay? But we also have the ability to say, oh, that was good. Let's remember that and let's do that again. Let's try that again because that was good. That worked out well. So thrilled is a very strong word that it indicates excitement about something, just really a more intense version of happiness or compacted version of it, I guess. People like thrillers because it's kind of like it's an energetic experience of joy. And it can have elements of fear or waiting or suspense involved in it too. And surprise. I'm going to give you an example of surprised because I think surprises are a positive thing, and you can have you can be surprised in a bad way too. But when a surprise is good, especially when somebody gives you something, this is what I like about birthdays and Christmas, especially Christmas, because a birthday is just you. But this is why Americans and Canadians, most of us love Christmas. There's lots of parties and there's lots of things. There's lots of hard work involved. Some people don't like it. You have to spend a lot of money. These are all negative things. But generally, the atmosphere of Christmas, I think, is positive. Lots of people are generous. People are giving presents. You get to meet your family. You get to have a party. You get to eat good food. These are all things that people like. So Christmas is very popular. It's the biggest holiday in North American culture. So one element of Christmas, though, is of course Santa Claus. It's based on, it has a religious background, and the reason for the season, as we say, is the birth of Jesus Christ. But Santa Claus, as a vehicle of commercial consumption, has really taken over the season in ways that I don't think our ancestors would be shocked at how much we focus on buying stuff and giving it, because that's not what Jesus did. But anyway, Santa Claus is a big part of it, and it's Santa Claus essentially is an icon originally for generosity, but he has been appropriated by America, first by Coca-Cola, and transformed into this figure of shopping at Home Plus for toys. If you get my meaning, I think all of you know Home Plus. That's my son loves Home Plus, and I try not to take him there ever because he always wants to go to the toy section. So anyway, Santa Claus is this figure of generosity, and he symbolizes, a lot of things. But one of them is just the fact that children anticipate getting something from their family, from their parents, grandparents, uncles, and aunts. And the build-up to that is what I remember so distinctly, that I was looking forward to Christmas months ahead. Like, it was like, as soon as the weather started to cool off, it was September or October, and I would be already just excited for Christmas, because that's when I get all the, not just a toy, but a bigger toy, like a Lego set, an expensive toy. So this is what happened. Little Jeremy, I think I was, how old was I? I'm not sure. I was probably 10 years old. I was a Lego maniac, so I really loved Lego. And I figured out that Santa Claus wasn't real. Actually, it's pretty embarrassing to admit, but my brother's 2 years younger than me. And I still believed in Santa Claus until I was like 8 years old. But my brother came home from school and he was like, yeah, Santa Claus is not real. The parents do it. He's not an actual person. And I was like, what? And my mother was kind of shocked, because she had carefully continued to, support my belief in Santa Claus. And then my brother came home from school, and some of his teacher or his friends just burst the bubble for me. So I knew Santa Claus was not real. So I knew that this is at 10 years old, and I knew that Mom and Dad were going to go shopping at some point and get something, and then, pretend it was Santa Claus, because I had a younger sister who was 6 years younger. So she was like 4 years old. So we all went through the, pretending that Santa Claus was real for her. But I knew that they were going to go shopping, not the night before, because my parents are pretty organized. So they were going to buy the present like 2 weeks before Christmas or something. So, and there was one place in my house that I wasn't really allowed to go. It was my parents' room. And especially around Christmas time, you were not allowed to go in the closet. And obviously, the reason you couldn't go in the closet was because there were presents there that we were not supposed to see, because it would ruin the surprise. But for some reason, my parents were not around, and I snuck in there, and I opened the closet, and I looked through the closet in the bottom. It was just sitting there at the bottom, and it was this particular space Lego vehicle that I just begged my parents to buy it. And I saw it. They had bought it. And sometimes my parents, refused to buy things when I asked them for big gifts. So I was excited, to say the least, that it was there. And so I shut the closet door and I ran out of the room. And I was like, yes, they got it. It's there. It's mine. I'm going to have it. But there was still 2 weeks to go. And the next 2 weeks were horrible because I knew about it, but I couldn't say I knew about it. So I just had to go to bed and lay in my bed thinking like, why is the time going so slow? Please, somebody like make time go faster so Christmas can come. But there's nothing I could do about it. So the 2 weeks were painful to experience. And then when we had the gifts under the tree on Christmas Day and everybody woke up in the morning and everybody opened their gifts, I was just desperate to open it. So I ripped it open and I was like, and I had to pretend. I was like, oh, this, I didn't know. You got this. I'm so excited. But I was actually just relieved to not have to try and sleep one more night. So it was not the same experience at all. And I will never forget that moment in my life where I ruined the surprise for myself, and I had to pretend to my parents that I don't even know if my dad watches this, he might learn something new because I'd never told my parents that I had done that. I don't think, and but now then I learned the value of surprise and how that added to the fun. Like I think in some ways the Christmas itself is not the best part of the season. It's the build up, the suspense, and the anticipation. And if you don't know what you're getting, that's better. So whenever my mother asked me, years later, and I was in high school, she said, "What do you want for your birthday?" I would say, "Just surprise me." And I do that to everyone. And some people don't like that. My wife is Korean, and she's not thrilled when I just say, she says, "What do you want for your birthday?" And I say, "Surprise me." And she's like, "Well, that's not any guidance. Like, what am I supposed to give you?" Lots of Koreans like to just give money because then you can buy what you want. But I like the experience of surprise. Okay, so you get the idea. That's what things that things that imprint things on you are memorable. Traumatic is a negative experience that can cause a lot of psychological anxiety and stress. And nostalgia, if you're feeling nostalgic, that means you're thinking back to a time when you really liked that time, and it's not like that anymore. It's natural to feel like the good old days were better than today, even if they weren't. So lots of people, if I ask somebody, what was the best time in your life in terms of school, I've gone through the whole system, and I would say kindergarten is by far, personally, in my opinion, kindergarten was my favorite time to go to school. I loved kindergarten. I wanted to go to school. I didn't want to stay home. I wanted to be in kindergarten. Elementary school was okay. Middle school was okay. High school, not great. I didn't like high school. University was fun too. I would probably say kindergarten is my favorite, university second, elementary school, middle school, high school last. And maybe that's because of nostalgia. Because I idealize my kindergarten experience. Maybe it wasn't as good as I remember it because it's, I'm old. So this is like 35 years ago that I went to kindergarten. So my memories have been sort of, polished up and any of the negative things have just kind of disappeared. And I just remember kindergarten as a golden age in my education. But I think kindergarten is more fun. Like, kindergarten is designed to be fun. So that's my opinion. So remember, when you talk about a memory, at the bottom of page 91, there's a really good, series of questions. Just make sure you cover the details.